Bobbie Jo Stinnett was 23 years old and 8 months pregnant on December 16th, 2004, the day she lost her life. She was found by her mother, Becky Harper. During the frantic 911 call, she described the scene as having blood everywhere, and it looked like Bobbie Jo's stomach had exploded. The truth of her death was tragic and beyond disturbing. Welcome to Fact and Suspicion. I'm your host, Dan, here with my co-host, Ben.
Hello.
And today we're going to be discussing the murder of Bobbie Jo Stinnett. This was big news when it happened back in 2004.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it, but
we were in college at the time, probably.
Judging by that intro, this does not sound pleasant.
No, this was a terrible case. It's one of the more disturbing ones I've researched, honestly. But let's get started. Let's talk about a little bit about Bobbie Jo. Bobbie Jo and her husband Zeb lived in Skidmore, Missouri. It's a very small town in northwestern Missouri.
Okay.
And strangely enough, even though it's a tiny town, Skidmore has been home to some very interesting cases. We haven't discussed any more of them on here, but I thought maybe I'd cover some of them just because they're local to this one we're talking about. Okay. But it's strange how there have been several notable cases from this one small town. But she and her husband, they raised and sold rat terriers. And they also went to dog shows with their rat terriers. And Bobbie Jo was also really active in this online rat terrier community called Ratter Chatter.
Okay.
So she's really big into those. She's pregnant. They didn't have a lot of money, but things were going pretty well for them. They had a good life. They had their dogs. They were having a baby. Things were looking good, right? And that was until December 16th. Now, as we said, her mother was trying to get a hold of her, couldn't get a hold of her. Went over to her house and found her. There was just so much blood. She said it looked like Bobbie Jo's stomach had exploded. And now investigators, when they got there, were able to determine that Bobbie Jo had been strangled and then had her fetus cut out of her womb.
Oh, dear God. Wait, was it still there?
No,
or had it been taken?
It had been taken. The fetus was taken. Now, it appeared because there was blood on Bobbie Jo's feet and
this was a woman that did this, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's blood on Bobbie Jo's feet and between her toes. So what the investigators were able to determine was that she was strangled and lost consciousness, but was not dead, and woke up again while she was being cut open.
Oh.
And stood up and tried to fight off her attacker, who then knocked her back unconscious.
Jesus.
And cut her open and took the baby.
That is maybe the most horrific thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, well, it is.
And we do a true crime podcast, so
it's terrible. Now, Bobbie Jo's actual cause of death was not strangulation or anything like that. It was blood loss. Yeah, probably. Because she bled out after that. I think it's nearly impossible to do even a cesarean in a hospital without giving someone a blood transfusion.
Right.
So just someone
imagine trying to do it
at home with a knife or whatever. It's insane.
There's no telling what kind of horrors that poor woman went through.
Yeah. Now the baby was gone, and
how far along was she?
8 months. So the fetus is viable, but it's still a month early, still about 4 weeks early. I don't know if exactly it's 4 weeks, but she's around 8 months. Now, so there's a good chance the baby's still alive.
Okay.
And authorities want to find that baby. That's the main thing right now.
Yeah, of course.
You find the baby. I mean, you want to find the killer, but find that baby. So immediately the sheriff attempts to send out an Amber Alert, and the state actually denied his request.
Because they didn't consider it a baby?
Well, no, it's not that they didn't consider it a baby. It's just there was no description of anything.
Oh. And I guess it didn't even have a birth certificate yet.
No birth certificate. No one had ever seen the baby to have any kind of description of it. We didn't know who the perpetrator was. They didn't have a description of the perpetrator. All they knew was a neighbor had said there was sort of a beat up car, possibly a hatchback, in the red one in the driveway that day. So they had a red dirty car, right?
I guess you do need a description of the kid.
Yeah, that's really all you have. But they did manage to get the Amber Alert out because the sheriff sort of went over the state police's head and went to a congressman and got him to kind of lobby for it and get an Amber Alert out there to get the word out there that this baby has disappeared.
How long did this take?
It didn't take very long at all, actually.
Okay.
Like they had that out soon, and it was actually becoming national news, within 24 hours too. So they actually,
I mean, whoever this person is, they had to be covered in blood.
well, yes, definitely would. But I mean, if no one actually saw them leave there, they could have gone somewhere and cleaned up, right? Now, Becky Harper, that was Bobbie Jo's mother.
Okay.
She knew that Bobbie Jo was expecting someone to come over to look at a dog that day.
Okay.
Someone she had been talking to online. And
it wasn't someone she knew, just someone who was interested.
Someone she knew online, basically. Someone that she talked to online, and they were interested in the rat terrier. They're going to come over and look at the puppies.
Okay.
Now, the investigators start looking. They dig in the computer, and they find some email communication between Bobbie Jo and a woman named Darlene Fisher, who is from Fairfax, Missouri.
Okay.
All right. And they're thinking, well, this is the person that's supposed to be here today to meet her and look at these dogs. So they start looking into Darlene Fisher of Fairfax, Missouri. And there is no Darlene Fisher of Fairfax, Missouri.
Oh.
There's not one living anywhere near
That's
Fairfax,
a red
Missouri.
flag.
So at this point, they're thinking, we've got an alias here. This is looking worse and worse. So, as I said, this is making national headlines, and they have got an Amber Alert out. So they receive a tip from someone, and I'm not sure if she saw this on the news or saw the Amber Alert or whatnot, but this woman called in a tip, and she said she suspected a woman named Lisa Montgomery.
Lisa Montgomery.
Right.
Did she say why she suspected her?
Yes. Now, Lisa also raised rat terriers and went to these dog shows.
Okay.
And she had been telling people at dog shows that she was pregnant. However, nobody really believed her because she didn't have a baby bump. She wasn't looking pregnant. She's supposed to be several months pregnant. And
it's a very bizarre lie to tell.
Yes, it is. And then all of a sudden she had her baby. She gave birth on the day that Bobbie Jo was murdered.
Really?
Yes. So they say we should need to look into Lisa Montgomery.
Yeah,
this is a suspect,
obviously.
Right? So they look up Lisa Montgomery. They just find her, and then she's living in Melbourne, Kansas. All right.
Okay.
So they've gotten this tip. They're working through that. Now it takes a little while. When they found that email, they were able to get the IP address, but in 2004, it takes a little while to track down an IP address.
Right.
So about this time, they get back that IP address, and they get back the location of the IP address.
Was it a message board or something or what?
It was a chat room.
Mm-hmm.
The Ratter Chatter was a chat room, and I think they may have had a message board as well.
Did they need a court order to get the IP address?
Yes. Well, I don't know that they had to have a court order. I know they were able to get the IP address from the email.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure that they needed a court order, and I know that the people from Ratter Chatter were actually cooperating with them, trying to find messages between Bobbie Jo and anyone else to point out. So they wouldn't have needed a court order. These people wanted to help, right? Okay. But at any rate, they tracked down the IP address, and they had the IP address, but like I said, in 2004, it takes a little time.
Yeah, of course.
To find out where this is. They finally track it down, and it's registered to a man named Kevin Montgomery in Melbourne, Kansas.
Ah.
And Kevin Montgomery is married to a Lisa Montgomery.
Well, I think we found our suspect here.
Yeah, this is all lining up, right? And this is really good. So the FBI goes and starts surveilling the house, and they see this dirty red, sort of beat up car out front that matches the description.
Yeah.
They see Lisa Montgomery going into the house with a baby.
Ah.
Now, obviously, Lisa Montgomery did claim she had just given birth. So if she had given birth, she would have had the baby too, right?
Did she say where she'd given birth?
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Now, authorities go to the house, and they basically knock on the door and say, "We're just looking into all new births because we've had this baby go missing in this terrible instance, and we just want to come in here and we want to ask you a few questions and everything." So they start questioning Lisa and her husband separately about it. And Lisa goes through several different stories that she tells them. Like, she tells them at first that she had gone on a shopping trip to Topeka, which the day before. This was just the next day. This was within 24 hours, by the way. Right. So she tells them at first that she had gone on a shopping trip to Topeka, and while she was on the shopping trip, she went into labor. So she gave birth in a women's hospital there in Topeka.
Okay.
And then brought the baby back home.
I'm guessing there was.
And so the police say, well, all right, can we see your discharge papers? We just need to investigate this. And she says, well, that's not actually what happened.
Oh.
I didn't want to tell my husband this because we don't have any money, but I actually gave birth here at home. And some of my friends were here to help me. I said,
well, who are your friends?
Well, let us call your friends so we can check that out. And she said, well, actually, they weren't actually here. They were just on call if I needed them. They were on standby, right? And they keep asking her questions, and she eventually confesses right there in the home that she did kill Bobbie Jo Stinnett and take the baby. Now, her husband, though, upon further investigation, actually thought she gave birth. Now, to tell the entire story, now this first part is Lisa saying this, that the reason she had to go get this baby was because she'd been telling her husband, Kevin, that she was pregnant for quite some time. And she had told him this several times. There's always something that happened, like she lost the baby, had a miscarriage. She had a stillbirth. One time she was supposed to got an abortion, right? And this time she was telling him that, she was pregnant, and he was acting like he didn't believe her. So she told him that she had an appointment on December 17th, which the day after the murder, with her OB. And he said, well, I want to go with you then. And she said, okay. But then she knows, Kevin's going to find out that I'm not pregnant because I don't have an appointment with any OB, right? And she's like, oh, I'm afraid he'll get violent or something. I don't know if that was true or not. But she felt like she had to go get this baby. Now, Kevin really did believe that she'd given birth, though.
You say get this baby like she just needed to head down to the store.
I understand. I just it seems like she was desperate for a child at this point, right? For whatever reason. So Kevin,
this seemed to be some sort of fixation with her too. If she'd been, obviously she'd gone through this several times, telling people she was pregnant.
Oh yeah, several times. Now Kevin, though he hadn't believed her, apparently, according to her story,
could she not get pregnant?
It turns out that in 1990 she'd had tubal ligation.
Oh.
So no, she couldn't get pregnant. She'd had 4 children, and then in 1990 had tubal ligation.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what that is. But
she had her tubes
tied. She can't get pregnant. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, she could not get pregnant, and she knew this obviously, but Kevin, her husband, didn't know this. She never told him, and
oh dear God.
He actually believed, apparently he wasn't very bright, that she had given birth in Topeka, just like she said she had, because she'd been telling forever she was pregnant. And then she calls him and says, hey, I just gave birth here in Topeka at this women's center. Can you come pick me up? But she hasn't picked her up at a fast food restaurant. Like, I don't know what the story was. She said, I had somebody drop me off over here to get some food. I don't know.
Right. There were no red flags going off.
Like I said, I don't think Kevin's very bright. Okay. You would think there'd be some red flags.
There's not very bright, and there's, hey, I just gave birth. Can you come pick me up at the local fast food joint?
I understand that.
I mean,
I understand the
disparity between those two
It's insane.
Things, right?
It's absolutely insane. But that's what she told him. And just to see Kevin in interviews and stuff, I believe that he did not think she murdered someone for this baby. I'm assuming that he really did believe it, and maybe she just told him so much crazy shit over the years.
I can understand why you wouldn't immediately jump to brutally murdered and cut the baby out of someone. But wouldn't your first thought probably be, oh, dear God, she stole this baby?
It would be for me. Yeah. I don't know about Kevin. All right. But like I said, she admits to this there in the house. So they start investigating. They start digging through the Montgomery's computer, and they found out that Lisa had been researching how to perform C-sections online.
Oh, dude.
And she had been sort of stalking Bobbie Jo online as well, keeping up with her pregnancy and stuff.
And she knew her from the rat terrier.
Well, she had met her before. I wouldn't say she really knew her, but she had met her at one of these dog shows. And she probably, Bobbie Jo probably mentioned, hey, I'm pregnant at the time. And, Lisa just zoned in on that and just stalked her from then on out. Now, they find that stuff on the computer, right? Then they look out in the car, the red car that they'd seen there, and there is so much evidence in the car. In the trunk, there's the bloody knife that she used, and also there's a piece of the umbilical cord in the trunk.
Oh, dear Lord, Daniel.
And in the front seat of the car, well, in the front cab, right, of the car, there is a note with Bobbie Jo's address on it. So I mean, she's already admitted to it, but there's tons of evidence here. Like she didn't really try very hard to cover this up.
Yeah, clearly not. Like she seemed like she was like completely out of her mind.
No, I completely. I think you probably have to be to do something like this. I mean, I'm not saying she didn't. She obviously planned this. This was very much premeditated, but I don't think you can be in your right mind and do something like this.
I don't know how you could be.
Right. Now, let me just go on and say the baby was fine. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. The baby was fine.
Well, that's good.
There was no problem. They took the baby to the hospital, check everything out. A lot of times when babies come early, they need to be in the NICU.
Right,
But this baby was for having been, an amateur C-section, baby's doing great. She was okay.
That is shocking, but
and it's great news.
bright spot in this
And
story, I suppose.
They did DNA testing just to be sure, and this was Zeb and Bobbie Jo's daughter.
Okay.
Now we move on because obviously Lisa Montgomery committed this crime.
Yeah, I think.
Now, she is tried federally for this though, because it's a crime.
She crossed state lines? Or?
Well, she did, but this was apparently it wasn't necessarily because of that. Anytime a kidnapping resulting in death is always going to be a federal crime.
Yeah, I didn't think of it. I don't know why I didn't think of it as a kidnapping.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But that's always a federal crime, and then the fact that she crossed state lines as well with the child, it's going to make it a federal crime.
Right.
Now this would bring a sentence of either life in prison or the death penalty.
Okay.
And she was obviously found guilty and was sentenced to death. Now,
I mean, given the nature of the crime, it's understandable why a jury would choose to.
Yes, and it is.
I mean, I'm not even a fan of the death penalty, but I can understand why a jury would vote for it.
I understand as well.
I assume it was a jury. I mean, I think in some states a judge can impose it.
Well, this is a federal case, so I think
right.
actually the judge does sentencing in any kind of federal case. There's not a.
I was under the impression that you had for the death penalty you had to have a jury.
Federally, I'm not sure. I think
it may differ from.
I'm not actually positive on these details, but she was sentenced to death at any rate.
Yeah, so don't take our word on this stuff here.
Now let's talk about Lisa Montgomery for a minute. Okay. Like we said, you can't be in your right mind if you do this. Okay. I know that this was a terrible, disturbing crime, and I know this was premeditated. But Lisa Montgomery was a severely mentally ill person.
No question about that, I would say.
She was seriously abused as a child. She had brain damage. Now, there are some claims that the brain damage came from her mother's alcoholism when she was pregnant, which is proven. Not necessarily that's where her brain damage came from, but we know that her mother was an alcoholic when she was pregnant with Lisa. And Lisa's stepfather also would grab the back of her head and slam her head against hard surfaces quite often when she was a child.
Jesus.
So this woman had brain damage, literal brain damage. Her mother and stepfather also sex trafficked her to her stepfather's friends and to people that would do services for them. Like work around the house, stuff like that, for the services. No, they trafficked this girl. Her own mother, that's supposed to protect her, was trafficking this girl. Her stepfather raped her from I think it was 9 to 10 onward. 10 was what I read onward.
I mean, that is a special kind of terrible household, man.
Oh, it is, and her stepfather was raping her the whole time too. So this girl had been through a ton, and she had been through abusive relationships when she was an adult. Like I said, she had 4 children, but she's with these abusive partners. And, she actually had diagnoses, after, she committed these crimes and people were, looking at her and trying to understand her mental condition. She had PTSD, depression, and borderline personality disorder.
Right. Right.
As well as now this was contested, but the defense would claim that she had pseudocyesis.
I'm not sure what that
which is a condition where a woman is not pregnant, but she believes
she is.
that she is pregnant.
But
so her body actually shows symptoms of pregnancy. Yes.
I've heard of that. I didn't know it was real, though.
Apparently it is real, but in this case, we're not positive if it was.
I mean, I sincerely doubt that she genuinely believed it. I mean, because why would she feel the need to go steal a baby if she genuinely believed she was pregnant?
Exactly. Right? So that was contested in trial, though her other mental illnesses were not. Obviously this woman had these mental illnesses.
Yeah, of course.
So I will say, even though this was a heinous crime, I don't think the government should be putting anyone to death that's that mentally ill.
So I agree with you, but I tend to oppose the death penalty in general.
Right. This woman obviously does not understand right and wrong the way that anyone else does. When you've been abused that severely as a child, I think your perception of that's going to be warped.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
At best. I'm sure she knew she was doing something wrong.
No,
but
I'll be honest, most of my objections to the death penalty are just kind of like epistemic. I don't know that we can, in most cases, we can know that they're guilty with enough confidence to
I completely agree with that.
Though in this case, that's my biggest complaint, and that doesn't seem to be an issue.
Yeah, this case we know that she did it, but again, I don't think anyone that is that mentally ill we should.
Yeah, I can agree with you.
We should be putting to death. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that she didn't even deserve to die, and I'm not saying that Bobbie Jo's family doesn't deserve that justice. I'm just saying that I'm not sure that it is our place or our government's place to make that decision when someone is that mentally ill. Now, we had a case before. We bring this up a lot, like the case of Daniel LaPlante, who was also severely abused as a child and ended up terrorizing people and committing a murder. Yeah. Now, he wasn't sentenced to death. Right. But again, I don't think he can be released to the public. And obviously, I wouldn't think that Lisa Montgomery could have been released.
Yeah, but we're not talking about whether she should be released.
No,
we're talking about whether she ought to be put to death. Has she been put to death yet?
Yes, she has actually. To finish that story, her lawyers tried several different appeals and a lot of things in the 11th hour trying to stop it. Her execution was actually scheduled for December of 2020. However, it had to be postponed a couple of times. One, because her lawyers had COVID, and then it was rescheduled for January of 2020. Now, what you have to understand is that on January 20th of 2021, on January 20th of 2021 was when Joe Biden would be inaugurated.
Okay.
And Biden had promised to put a moratorium on all federal executions.
Right.
So basically, if her lawyers could have delayed it until the 20th of January, she would have been commuted to life in prison.
Gotcha.
But they were not able to. They took things all the way to the Supreme Court, arguing that she did not understand her actual sentence of death, understand all the consequences of what she had done. And the Supreme Court voted 6-3 against her and ordered that she be executed immediately. And she was executed on January 13th, 7 days before Biden would have been inaugurated.
What's the lady's name that she murdered?
Bobbie Jo Stinnett.
What did her family think?
No, her family, they completely supported her being executed, and I don't blame them.
And that's generally the case with victims' families. It's impossible.
Especially when you know that this is...
and part of the function of a justice system, obviously I think rehabilitation should be an important aspect, but particularly in cases where rehabilitation is probably not going to be a reasonable conclusion. Mm-hmm. Another important function of a justice system is to give the victims peace. People have to feel that the justice system works for them. I
agree. And there have been several cases where I feel like the victim's family has jumped a little jump to conclusions a bit and want the death penalty in cases where we haven't had real solid proof that this person committed the crime.
Yeah.
But in this one, we know that it was Lisa Montgomery.
I mean, we've seen families cling to, even if we're not talking about the death penalty, just cling to assumptions of guilt long after it seems obvious that that they're innocent.
Right.
I mean, we saw that in the West Memphis 3 case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, eventually, I think all the parents have changed their mind. They don't think it was the 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Maybe not all.
Some of the parents have died since then, so I'm not sure how they feel.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about in the Paradise Lost movies. I know in the first one, they were all pretty much burn them. Mm-hmm. And then as the documentary series went on, I know that most of them changed their mind.
Right. But in this case, I mean, there was so much overwhelming evidence that we knew it was Lisa Montgomery.
Right. This was not about guilt.
And I cannot disagree with the family at all. I'm not trying to disagree with the family. I think they had every right to want that death penalty. I just said I don't agree with the death penalty, mostly because obviously you can never know for sure if this person committed the crime. But also when someone is so mentally ill, I'm not sure if they can be held to that same
set of standards.
I'm not saying they can't be held to a standard, just to put them to death.
To that standard, right?
Is seems a bit harsh to me. But like now, I will say,
I'll be honest, that does seem like a very large mitigating factor.
It does. Now, but let me go a little farther though, right? Now, I think that like I'm not trying to advocate vigilante justice or anything, but if like if her husband or her mother had sort of snapped and went and found Lisa Montgomery when she was on the way into the courthouse and shot her, I would not think that person should stand trial even. Like, let them go, right? I mean, I understand. I would not blame them for doing that.
Well, there's a difference between completely understanding and not wanting you tried. I don't want to encourage people to take justice into their own hands.
But I think that I would say that person was definitely out of their mind and shouldn't be held to that standard either, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Now, there was a case several years ago of, I don't know if you remember this, a man named David Barajas.
That name sounds familiar.
He, this is not any part of that case, but just what we're talking about, right? David Barajas was on the way home from somewhere with his family one night, and their vehicle broke down. So he and his 2 young sons get out to push the car. Okay. I believe one was 11, one was 12. And while they're pushing, a drunk driver comes along and crashes into their car, killing both the children.
Oh, God.
Now, they were not very far from David Barajas' house. And somehow, not proven, but somehow someone went and got a .357 Magnum, which David Barajas had ammunition and a holster for in his home, but not the gun, and shot that man in the head before the authorities got there.
Oh.
Now, a lot of people think this was probably David Barajas.
Yeah,
and he went to trial for that, but I would not have even tried to send that man to trial, honestly. How can you?
Was the guy drunk?
Yeah, he was drunk. He was a drunk driver.
God.
Like how do you hold someone whose 2 sons were just basically murdered?
Yeah, no, I understand.
You know what I'm saying? Now, David Barajas was acquitted on this. They said there wasn't enough evidence. I think mostly it's just a jury in Texas is not going to find someone guilty for that.
Yeah, probably not.
But right, that's the case. That
sounds like a jury who was looking for a reason to acquit the guy.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised the prosecutor chose to move on that one. But like I said, it's just you can't hold a parent whose child has been murdered, or someone that's had that kind of trauma to the same standard either. I feel like so. I just feel like there are certain extenuating circumstances in these kind of cases where this person was obviously not in their right mind. Now, I'm not going to argue it nearly as hard for Lisa Montgomery as, a lot of people would. I can understand feeling the need that she be put to death for what she did, because it was a heinous crime.
Oh, God.
But like I said, you have mitigating factors here with the mental illness. And I think it's something that we should have discussions about, and we should at least think about.
No, I agree. I mean, and let's be honest, with life in prison, you can't harm anyone else.
Right. I remember when we first restarted federal executions in, I want to say it was 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Like we'd had I don't remember how many years we had.
It had been
an
since
execution.
72 or 76.
Sometime in the 70s. I honestly do not remember.
I think it was 72.
But I think it was 72. But at any rate, the first person they executed was Timothy McVeigh.
Right.
Still just have no problem with him being executed. Right.
Fair
like,
enough.
no, but still you're going to have certain circumstances where I feel like it's just not the right option. But this has been sort of a dark episode, and
yeah, a little bit.
But it's an interesting case. It's something I wanted to discuss. We'd like to thank you.
Also, I want to point out, if you are somebody who is in favor of the death penalty, no judgment. Like, I absolutely understand people supporting the death penalty. I supported it for years.
Right. Well, like I said, my main disagreement is it's hard to really know who committed.
I just
the
don't
crime,
trust our
even with a lot
justice
of
system
evidence.
enough at this point to
it.
be putting people to death.
Nah, you can't. You really can't. But again, it's probably a good place to wrap up here.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank you for watching / listening to Fact and Suspicion. If you enjoy our content, we'd love to hear from you. Interact any way you can. Like, subscribe.
Tell other people.
Tell other people. That's the biggest thing. And the more views and listens we get, the more, it really helps us out. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.